George Stoney was recently honored when one of his award-winning documentaries, Shepherd of the Night Flock, was chosen by the Donnell Library to be restored and preserved.
That film was recently chosen to launch its new restoration program, archiving program. They think that film itself is the most reliable archival medium, and they've actually made new prints of some of our films, and that print is gorgeous.
Restoring and preserving film is something he feels strongly about.
We talk about films being a permanent record. My belief is that we're all writing on sand. We've let the DVDs are collapsing. The films we know don't last very long. The video goes, it's chips and so forth and so on. And the archivists are making a desperate effort to try to hold on to things. But we've yet to describe anything as reliable as papyrus or stone or clay. You take a Sumerian tablet of 3000 BC, and we do have one, and you could read the codex, which the archivist can do, then you know what it says. Try to read a floppy disk of 1953. The desperate effort to preserve stuff is going to be defeated by so-called progress.
George walked us through some of the memories he's preserved at his Greenwich Village fifth-floor walk-up apartment, overflowing with pictures, clippings, and awards. He talked to us there and at the studio at MNN, a public access television station that he fathered.
I think that the variety of approaches, which is illustrated by public access, is needed. And yet, I think that we haven't yet learned to use it to its best advantage. We have a lot to learn.
About his documentaries,
I think that when I got involved in documentaries in the late 40s, we knew we were just making films. And we didn't kid ourselves that we were capturing reality. And I think that grave harm has been done to so-called documentary by limiting the maker to what so-called verite approach. I think that a combination of reality and recreation often produces the best results. The example of that is All My Babies. We were very much influenced by the Italian neorealist tradition at the time. That is, you find real people, real locations, and then you find a story that is real to those people and you reenact it. And we made very strong films at that time. The film itself is a two-dimensional medium for a three-dimensional world. And you have to do all kinds of things to add that third dimension. There again, you're not capturing reality.
George's films let people speak for themselves, eloquently.
We are not afraid. And those lines helped convince us that we were not afraid.
He gives a voice to the poor.
The strong family ties that exist among country folks stand them in good stead now. People who have lived in the city or suburbs for most of their lives may look back with a smile of nostalgia to the time when aunts and cousins were more than once-a-year visitors. In suburban culture, family ties are considered a good thing, but they're seldom tested by this kind of desperate necessity.
A voice to the displaced.
We don't want to be a Canadian citizen. We don't want to be American citizens. They told us a long time ago that we were North American Indians. And today we feel this way too. We have feel this way because we think that this reservation is ours. And it does not belong to the white man. It's the only part we still have left.
The fighters for their place in the world.
You could take your black hands and you could stir it in their dough or in their foods, and you could take your black body and lay in the bed with the child and protecting it, but you couldn't come in their front door.
People ask me, how many films did you do, have you done? And I say, I don't know, because which are my films? They're always a collaboration. And I think it's often forgotten when we feature documentary filmmakers that documentary is bound to be a collaboration. And the first people you collaborate with are the people in front of the camera. And so your responsibility is to represent them as they would like to be represented. And that's a very different attitude from one that you get in the commercial media. This is the flyer for the newest film called Flesh and Ecstasy, Gaston Lachaise and the Woman He Loved. This is my Valentine to Betty Pulston, my great love, because Lachaise's model, wife, and obsession was Isabel. And he fell in love with her for the same reason that I fell in love with Betty. And so the film is a celebration of his work and her body. And almost all the voiceover are quote from his passionate love letters.
George continues to teach at NYU.
My greatest satisfaction comes from the young people I meet in my teaching. I'm trying to influence my students to not use their cameras to catch people out, but to make people more interested in their communities. I think that education is a matter of connecting people to people.
George's belief in connecting people led to his leadership role in creating what has been called a new medium, public access TV.
I think public access gives many more people a chance to express themselves. I wish it were used to have people talk with one another more and not just to the camera. I see it too often used for personal aggrandizement.
George is not slowing down.
I have classes assigned to me for the fall and spring of next year, and I have a major documentary in the editing room right now.
Why in his 90s does he continue to work so hard?
Do I have a choice? You see, in my career, I have never made a film by myself. I've always had colleagues. And those colleagues depend on me and I depend on them. And I can't stop because I would let them down. The same thing's true of teaching. People come into my classes and I get to know them and they get to know something about my connections. And 2, 3, 5 years later, they write me, they call me, they want to know. I can't quit because it would be a betrayal of their trust.
How does he feel about old age?
I made a series of films at the Jewish Home and Hospital for the Aged many years ago about the physical rehabilitation of aged patients. That was when it was considered extreme to have people 75 and 80 years old taking exercises and getting up after strokes and that kind of thing. Now it's generally recommended. But I spent a lot of time with those people. And recently I went back and looked at those films again. And what shocked me was my condescension. I treated these people as though they didn't have anger, and they didn't have hurts that deserved to be expressed strongly. I think that we are such a youth-oriented culture. Our idea is beauty is set with the young people. The commercials, we're constantly trying to make ourselves look young. And I don't see that that's changing greatly. And I find that tendency even in myself. When I'm tottering around, I'm a bit ashamed of it, rather than saying, well, that's what one could expect at 92.